Roofing University with Adam and Mason.
Welcome to another episode of Metal Roofing University. I'm your host, Adam Clark, and my co-host, as always, Mason Burchett.
How we doing?
Mason, 2021, welcome.
We made it.
We made it.
Yay.
So, like many of you, 2020 was a year that felt like a roller coaster with ups and downs. And in our industry, we certainly experienced a lot of really great success and a lot of great growth. It was filled with its share of challenges as well.
No doubt.
But we don't think that 2021 is just going to magically flip a switch and not be the same as 2020. But we do think that some of the success that we experienced in 2020 is going to carry over, and the strength of the building materials world and coated coils in particular is very optimistic. So we're going to continue to push out content, try to educate and inform people as much as we can to get the right product in their hands.
Yeah, so in this episode, we're going to build on a previous episode that we did. I think it's probably the episode before last, or 2 episodes ago, where we talked about substrates. We talked about galvalume and some of the importance of selecting a quality substrate for steel panels. We're going to build on that today with the next layer, literally, of the process, and that's paint. So when paint and coatings are talked about in the metal roofing world, a hot topic debate is Kynar versus SMP or something like that. And we'll talk a little bit about that, but we're going to bring that debate down to something that probably affects more consumers than Kynar SMP, and that's poly versus SMP.
Yeah, and we see poly paint, even though it's not as prevalent as it was 10 years ago or 15 years ago, it was kind of the norm. You know, it was definitely more commonly used for metal roofing applications. And while we still see it pushed and promoted, especially in rural areas, especially where price points are really, really tight and really, really low. There's some industries like carports that we still see some of this poly paint used in. And we want to be clear that it's absolutely different than the siliconized modified polyester or the SMP systems that we use at Best Buy Metals. And Mason, we'll talk a little bit about this as well, but the poly paint has a series and a set of downfalls that we want to make sure that we're pointing people away from intentionally. And again, there may be some industries where the poly paint works and you kind of know what to expect, and that's fine. But on the other side of the spectrum is the PVDF, the really high dollar, high value. I mean, I don't want to say that the PVDF doesn't have some benefits that the SMP even doesn't carry, but for an individual's application, they really need to know the difference between these 3 paint systems. And so as we get into this discussion today, we're going to talk about what makes up these different types of paints, poly, SMP, and PVDF, and what application looks best for you.
Yeah, so let's start by defining some of those words that we're using for people that may not be familiar with it. When we refer to Kynar or poly or SMP as a quote-unquote paint, we're actually talking about the resin that's in the paint. So polyester is a resin, SMP is a resin, Kynar, Hylar, those are resins that help make up a paint system. So for coating applications in the steel industry, you've got a couple of things that factor into making up a paint system. You've got the resin, like we just said, and then you've got pigments, which is what gives the material color. Those resins bond that pigment to the substrate, keep everything together, doesn't fly off in the wind. And then you've got a solvent, which makes it something that's actually coatable onto a panel. And so when you combine all those things together, you have a paint system. So when we say poly, SMP, and Kynar, we're specifically referring to the resin that is used in these paint systems. And we're going to talk about resins, and we're going to talk about pigments too in this episode. So I want to make sure we give that distinction. So right out of the gate, couple of, like you said, the most popular resins we see used are that poly, SMP, and Kynar. And SMP and Kynar, I think, are most certainly the dominant resins used in the industry. Those poly resins are low grade, low quality resins. They're usually paired with low quality pigments and applied on low quality substrates. It's made to be an economy secondary panel. That's why historically it's been used in soffit applications that aren't subjected to weather or UV, or industrial applications where price was the only driving factor and performance didn't matter.
Yeah, interior too. We see that for some,
use.
some liner panels, or what a lot of people refer to them as. If you have a white liner panel in a warehouse, it gives a little bit more light in the structure, and that application is fine.
It's fine.
You don't have UV exposure, you don't have exposure to the elements, you typically don't have the same type of abrasions with sand or dust or debris going across the surface of the system. So that's fine. But I think what you really touched on is it's economy, or their inferior products, and that comes in the sense of less dollars. They're cheaper, right? They're more affordable, but there's a cost that comes along with them being a cheaper product.
Yeah, and like in our industry, like any other industry, there's always people that misuse materials to try to get a couple extra bucks, and that's what we've seen happen with these poly coatings. It's cheaper. Smaller suppliers can get an upper hand over their competitors, for lack of a better term, by offering these systems as a competitor. That they'll offer a tough rib panel with these poly coatings on it as a rival against something that we sell with an SMP coating on it, and some consumers may not know the difference.
Yeah, and some people might ask, why do they even do that? I mean, the advantage of a bigger company, you have purchasing power, you have economies of scale, which allows you to produce products more efficiently. You typically have processes and ways to use waste differently than smaller companies. So for these smaller companies to go to market at the same price or a similar price as a bigger company, they have to find a way to purchase materials at a lesser cost. And when they don't have the purchasing power, well, they have to buy a more affordable or a cheaper product. And that's why we see, if it's not deceptiveness, then we see a little bit of clever marketing from companies that are using the poly paint system to go to market at a similar price to those using the SMP.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about. I want to briefly just mention Kynar so we can let people know about it, because it is a good resin, obviously a great resin. And then let's dive into poly and SMP compared, apples to apples, so people are aware of it. First, let's talk about pigments real quick, though, because this is part of the conversation. Pigments, like I said, is that part of the paint system that gives the material its color, right? So you've got essentially two primary categories of pigments that are used in metal roof coatings, and that's organic or inorganic coatings. Organic coatings are lower quality coatings. They're usually really vivid in color, and fade quickly, chalk quickly. They don't bond very well to resin, so they don't perform very long either. Those are the kind of pigments we usually see paired with those low quality poly resins, right? Then we have inorganic pigments, which are synthetic or naturally occurring without carbon compounds. And those, there's also a subclass of inorganic pigments called ceramic pigments, which is primarily used in the paint systems we coat our metal roofing products with. And those are formulated out of metal oxides. They're very high integrity pigments. They hold their color very well. They have a high gloss retention. They're made to withstand prolonged exposure to ultraviolet radiation. These are the kind of pigments that are used in residential applications and should be used in residential applications. So to summarize that, you've essentially got these inorganic pigments that are coupled with high quality resins, which give you a good paint system for a metal roof. Then you've got organic pigments, which are coupled with those low quality resins like poly that are supposed to be used on interior applications, soffit applications. Unfortunately, we see them sold as residential panels, resulting in a very unhappy consumer.
Yeah, and we'll kick back to the PVDF as well, because we want to spend some time really comparing poly and the SMP paint system. So the PVDF does use these higher quality pigments, the higher quality resin, and without a doubt, from an overall performance standard, PVDF does perform better than SMP and certainly better than poly. But what we're saying is there's a value benchmark that consumers need to be aware of. What you're paying for the PVDF versus the end result is that creating the value that the consumer is looking for. And our observation, and based off of the thousands and thousands of customers that we interact with every single year, we've discovered that the SMP system for residential or commercial, light commercial application tends to be a much more appealing value benchmark than PVDF. Again, PVDF does give you some benefits that outlast the SMP system, but the cost associated with that typically does not match the value that the customer is looking for. So we want to be really clear about that, because PVDF is promoted as the premium, as the best, as what you should get. And in some applications that may be true, but what we're saying is for a residential application, the final product after 30 or 40 years, Kynar or PVDF versus SMP, is going to be so similar that a residential homeowner is really going to say, I'm willing to pay 40% less to get an SMP result. In 40 years, I'm satisfied with that. And I think that that's where we stand, is that's a product that we really promote. That's where the majority of our business is at Best Buy Metals, is with that SMP residential product. And it's important that people know that going into the conversation, because some other suppliers are going to push and push and push the PVDF because it's known. People are familiar with the Kynar or the Hylar name, and it's known, but it's not necessarily the perfect fit for somebody who's looking for a certain value benchmark.
That's right, and it's not necessarily a conversation of which one's better. Like you said, they have different value benchmarks, and I mean, Kynar, while it is a premium resin and great resin, it's also a softer resin and is more susceptible to abrasion than SMP is. Also, SMP has evolved since it was even started being used. You can achieve longevity in resins with SMP technology that rival PVDF now, and that wasn't always true. And you can do that with lower silicone content in the SMP formulations. And that's just because technology advances over time, and we're able to offer high quality coatings without breaking the bank. And so it's not always a question of, am I settling by doing SMP resin as opposed to a Kynar resin, like you said.
Yeah. So be mindful of that as you're exploring your metal roofing options. The PVDF is something that's going to be viewed as a premium product. And while it does have a value, make sure that it's the value that you're looking for. And what we would say is, if this is going to be for a residential application, if you can find a color that meets your needs in the SMP, you're only going to see color fade reaching a certain point after 30 years, after 40 years. With SMP, that the vast majority of our customers are really satisfied with. There may not be a need to upgrade to a PVDF that's not performing significantly beyond the SMP. So that kind of hopefully sheds a little bit of light on what our stance is between the SMP and the PVDF. Both really serve a purpose. We find that the SMP serves a broader purpose for our customer base. So Mason, let's start looking a little more closely at SMP versus poly, and what consumers should be aware of, the difference between the two, and what you expect to see over the life of those two systems.
Yeah, so on the outset, we'll talk about where this conversation is appropriate as far as panel systems. Typically where we're seeing the debate between poly and SMP is in exposed, fastened roofing systems. You're not even really seeing Kynar on those systems most of the time. People that are going after an exposed, fastened system are people that like the style and also want to get into a metal roofing system, a quality metal roofing system, without breaking the budget, right? So these are systems that rival the cost of asphalt shingles. This is a big portion of what Best Buy Metals does, is these exposed fasten systems. And that's the kind of panel systems that we typically see the problems with poly resins being used. So when we're talking about that, what consumers need to be aware of is really just the questions they should ask their supplier when they're going to purchase one of these systems. And that is, what kind of paint is coated on, and we talked about last time what kind of substrate, so hopefully you know those questions to ask. Now is what kind of paint is being used on it. It's a high quality polyester paint. Okay, pause.
Yeah.
Let's define that more, because SMP is a polyester. It's silicone modified polyester. So just because somebody says it's a quote unquote high quality polyester paint does not mean it's good enough to go on your roof. So polyester paint, or poly systems, we say that just to make sure it's distinguished from SMP. These poly systems they look great, and they're virtually indistinguishable from SMP when they've initially been coated. It's hard to tell the difference. So you could put red against red, and the trained eye might be able to tell, but to the average consumer, you probably wouldn't be able to know the difference.
Right.
But the problem is you're going to save a little bit on that initial investment. The truth is, you're not even going to save that much. We're probably talking in the area of 20 cents per linear foot on average. You think that sounds about right?
Yeah, and so let's say we have an average roof that is, let's say 1,500 linear feet.
Yeah.
You know, that's what, 4,500 square feet. That's still a pretty good size roof. Well, if you say, let's take 20 cents, which might even be the extent or the maximum difference between the poly and the SMP that you see going to market. I mean, and you're really talking about $300, right? $300 to go from a system that has a poly paint system, a lower quality resin, a lower quality pigment, that's going to, and we'll talk about this in more detail, but fade more quickly, peel off the substrate or peel off the panel more easily, be more affected by the elements than the higher quality SMP. You know, for $300, is that worth it? I mean, do you want to see a green roof, like a dark green, hunter green or forest green, turn lime green in 5 years? Are you going to be happy with that on your roof for the next 35 years or whatever you expected that system to last? And those are the questions that really people need to be asking themselves. Or am I going to be happy with that discount that I gave myself for buying a lower quality product?
And you won't, and here's why. Because you made the statement, are you going to be happy with that over the next 30 to 35 years? You're not, because in most cases, those roofs aren't only going to look bad, they're not going to last that long, and here's why. So let's say that you choose a metal roofing system that has that poly coating. You get a nice green, hunter green, forest green metal roof. Get it on, looks great, right? We're not talking about 10 years, 15 years down the road. We're talking about 3-5 years down the road.
Yep.
That dark, deep green roof is going to be yellow, like nasty yellow, right? It's going to be yellow. Not only that, the paint, the resin. And when we're talking about resin, think of like if you've ever spilled a laser printer cartridge and it's kind of like a really fine powdery dust. That's the kind of stuff that's on your roof. And so that resin breaks down. That's where chalk comes from. And so that resin separates. The paint system is literally breaking apart. And you can swipe your hand across the surface of your roof. Your hand's going to be white because it's chalking. And that resin's coming off there. So the color's going to fade. This is in 3 to 5 years, Adam. The color's going to fade. The resin's going to break apart. It's going to start chalking. The paint's going to start flaking. It's going to start detaching from the substrate. That's what's going to happen to the paint system, right? Paint by nature is permeable. What that means is that it absorbs moisture. It's supposed to. That's how paint works. It absorbs moisture. And that sounds scary, but it's okay, because that's why we put a quality substrate on our metal roofing panels, right? That's why we don't just paint raw steel. We put a substrate over the material. As that paint absorbs moisture and then releases it back, that's what it means to be permeable. That quality substrate protects the panel from degrading. Also, the paint formulation itself can protect in that. So when you've got just a poly system absorbing that moisture, it's going to affect that paint system. That's why it's important to have silicone modified polyester. Anybody that knows much will know that silicone has those properties that protect from moisture decay. And so that silicone modified polyester paint system that we're putting in our coatings helps protect that paint system from breaking down when it absorbs and releases moisture.
So we've talked about price point being something that maybe a consumer can be mindful of when they're going and they're comparing different roofing systems. How else can a consumer or purchaser be aware of what they're getting into from a metal provider?
as far in regards to the paint system. I mean, I think if you can come right out and ask the question, what kind of paint is being used on my roof? If you can use terminology that manufacturers should know, like silicone modified polyester, and they're not able to give you a clear answer on whether that's what's been applied, that's a huge red flag. If the only word they can throw at you is polyester, then you should be scared. You should be concerned that's not a quality paint system that's going on the roof. Your manufacturer should be educated enough to tell you.
And what we've noticed, especially over the last couple of years, as we've been trying to be very intentional to collect good information so that we can share it with our customers, is that paint suppliers are generous with their information. You know, all of our warranties at Best Buy Metals, you know exactly what you're getting. It says the paint provider, it says what name the warranty is or what name the product is for the paint system. So whether you're working with Sherwin-Williams and the Weather XL system, or working with Axo Nobel and the Ceramistar 1050, which is where the ceramic, you know, these premium inorganic pigments come into play. Metal suppliers should be able to communicate about their products, about their paint systems, but they should also have documentation. You know, our warranties show what the fade levels are, the delta units, or the change of color over the period of time for wall and roof applications. They should know what the chalk, you know, warranty is. They should know what the crack and the peel warranty is. And if they can't provide that information, if they can't provide a warranty document to you, but they're boasting a warranty, you know, there's some question there as well. We've got our warranties up on our website because we want everyone to know that we're on the level, you know, and we're not trying to hide anything. And it's important that everybody who is purchasing a metal roof and is expecting it to last 40 years is really taking the time to invest and look into the warranty paperwork. Yeah,
and I'll say this because it's true to our industry just like it is to anybody else's. There are warranty wars that take place, and you should not always take a warranty at the name of the warranty. Just because a paint system has a 25 to 40 year warranty does not mean that's how long the paint system is going to perform. Like you said, we're very transparent about our warranty. Our warranty is very clear. It'll show you exactly how many 100 units that you can expect it to fade up to evenly across evenly exposed roof surface area. We're very clear about the amount of exposure, how close to salt spray. All of that is outlined in our warranty. A lot of warranties, especially with these poly warranties, try to get crafty with the language that's used into deceiving the consumer into thinking they're getting a product that rivals SMP when they're truly not. And if you examine the wording in the warranty, you'll see it may be a 20-year warranty, maybe a 30-year warranty, but that warranty is probably not covering chalking. It's not covering fading at any level. It's not covering even fade, which is a huge deal, or your roof's going to look like it's got the mange. It's not covering crazing or chalking or cracking. There's a lot of those things that even though the warranty may be covering something, it may not be covering what you think that it's covering.
Yeah, and if you want to get additional information on what the, you know, kind of these premium timelines are for the SMP systems that we use at Best Buy Metals, give us a call. Even if you're not from the, you know, Best Buy Metals area, even if you're further out and you just want information, we can tell you what you should expect from a good SMP system, whether it be paint fade or whether it be chalking. You know, we'll at least give you the guidelines that you should be looking for. And if you do get a copy of someone's warranty, or you are able to communicate with somebody who's providing you your materials, you at least know whether they're in the ballpark of what is considered normal, or if they start talking about a thrifty panel, or if they start talking about a secondary panel, you'll know what to avoid.
That's right. So, you know, our warning to consumers is do your due diligence in asking the suppliers the questions about the paint systems that we just told you about, and don't totally look for lowest price, because you will get a lower price with the poly system. And I'll say this, I want to marry this episode to the episode we did about substrates. A supplier that's using poly resins on the roofing systems are probably using inferior substrates, or willing to at least. So not only are you getting a low quality resin, you're getting a low quality substrate. And the detriment of that, which is why I was saying that roof's not going to last 30 years, is when that paint starts absorbing and releasing moisture and it gets through that low quality substrate, the material is going to break down. You're going to get holes in your roof. You're going to start seeing rust through the roof. It's a big deal. It's more than just aesthetics. It's actually we're talking about the performance of the roof itself. And so while you may have saved a couple $100 on the initial purchase max, and we've been doing this a long time, how big of a job does it have to be to see savings over $1,000, right?
It's big.
It's got to be a big job.
Yeah.
So we're only usually talking about a couple $100 savings. You're going to be replacing this roof.
Well, let's talk about the payback too, because energy efficiency is something that is a huge advantage for metal roofing. You know, you start to see great energy efficiency. There are some characteristics of the steel itself that helps create an energy efficient system, but really the coatings play a big role in that as well. And when the coatings start to get dull, when you start to lose your gloss finish, you start to lose your energy or some of your energy efficiency. Well, how many years does it take having a lower energy efficiency to cover that $300 that you saved?
That's right.
You know, if you're looking at the bigger picture, if you're looking at the life of this roof, you might be talking about 3 or 4 years before you get that savings back, but that's 3 or 4 years where you will get that savings back. And yeah, I understand, you know, sometimes you have to look at what you have to invest up front, but on the grand scheme of a quality roof that's going to last you a lifetime, you really want to make sure that you're putting the investment or the appropriate investment at the front end so that you can enjoy those benefits throughout the life of that system.
Yeah, that's right. Not only when we talked about the reasons not to buy poly, but some of the reasons to buy SMP is that it performs in all the ways that poly doesn't, that we already talked about. And like you said, it has those energy efficient properties that poly does not have. So a large portion of your metal roof's solar reflectance capabilities come from the quality resin. And so you do sacrifice that when you choose to go with a low quality paint system. And we're talking about significant savings. I mean, these are quality SMP usually has a solar reflectivity rating of anywhere between 30 and 70%, depending on the color. That's huge. That's huge. And we're seeing consumers save anywhere from 20 to 25, upwards of 30% on their heating and cooling costs because they're using these resins. That's a big deal. Such a big deal that the government even recognizes tax credit. It qualifies for Energy Star tax credits and lead points and all of those other green programs. That's something that is not recognized with poly systems because they simply do not have those qualities.
So a lot of people may be asking, well, why do you guys care, you know, about what system we buy as long as you get, you know, the sale at the end of the day?
Sure.
And, you know, my experience has been every metal roof is a billboard for our industry.
That's right.
You know, and the reason that we care, one, because our customers are important. Really, we have a heart for this entire industry, and we care about the people who are interacting with the coated coil industry and the form steel industry anyway. But some of it is self-preservation and understanding that if everybody thinks that a green roof is going to turn yellow in 3 to 5 years, they're not going to want to buy metal from us. You know, so that's one of the reasons that we like to communicate this information, is because we want to make sure that we continue to have sustainability and stability in our industry by promoting the right products for our customers. And we believe that the SMP paint system is the right product. Not only is it going to last a long time and look good for a long time, but it's at a great value benchmark, a great price point that's really attractive, very comparable to a 30-year architectural shingle, where, you know, people who are tired of replacing shingle roofs every 10 or 12 years want something that's going to last them a little bit longer, but maybe don't have the investment to pay more than that. Great, we've got a great system in our tough rib SMP Weather XL system. I mean, it's really going to be a very, very high satisfactory, high quality product, and we want to make sure that that information is shared appropriately within an industry that does tend to focus on PVDF or Kynar, and it's something that we feel very passionate about.
Yeah, and that goes back to our values as well. Best Buy Metals doesn't just exist to make money. We legitimately care about our consumers and the products that we're putting out on the market. Like you said, we care about the industry's health. We care about American jobs, which is why we only source domestic paint systems, domestic SMP systems, because quality control standards are higher here in the United States. Again, something you don't get from poly systems. They're a lot of times they're foreign systems with low quality control standards. We care about those things. Those things matter to us. And so that's why we've chosen to offer those products.
Well, we're always interested to learn more about what's important to you as a consumer. So we've been really spending a lot of time focusing on quality of products, substrates, paint, quality of manufacturing and processes. And that's been a really fun way for us to exercise some of the experience that we've gained over the last number of years. But certainly take some time if you have questions that are relevant to your experience or relevant to your situation. Let us know. We're always looking for relevant topics to cover, information that we can dig into a little bit deeper. I think that's been something that's been fun doing these podcasts, is spending some time to research products that we know about, but we want to know even more about, so we can continue to put good information out there.
Yeah, so if you want to learn more about the topic we just discussed, you can head over to metalroofingu.com, check out the blog. I just finished a blog post about this, and it's got a lot more technical information and some pretty little graphics that took me a long time to design, so please be sure to look at those.
The molecular layout
the
of
molecular
all the paint,
layout of SMP versus poly. So do check that out. Also, if you liked the podcast, consider subscribing and check us out on our other channels. We're on YouTube, we're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, we're everywhere, guys. We're on TikTok. We're everywhere, except Google Plus, because they shut that down. So we're on all the channels. Go check us out, and thanks for the love, guys. We'll catch you next time.